The afternoon sun streamed through the tall, imposing windows of the Senate Banking Committee hearing room, casting long, sleepy shadows across the polished mahogany table. It was the kind of procedural afternoon that defines most of modern governance. A dry discussion of fiscal responsibility that had already thinned the crowd. The room was, to be generous, half empty. Most senators, having already performed for the cameras or fulfilled their duties, had left for the day. A handful of reporters, resigned to the mundane, scrolled idly through their phones. CSPAN's cameras recorded it all with a mechanical, indifferent hum. At the center of this sleepy scene sat Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. He was patiently, almost placidly, answering questions, his wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. His cadence was measured, the folksy drawl of a man who'd spent 5 terms as Louisiana's state treasurer and understood that budgets were marathons, not sprints. Then, the doors burst open. It was not an arrival, it was a theatrical production. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stormed in, her entrance perfectly timed to disrupt the quiet. This was not procedure, this was performance. The energy in the room shifted instantly, as if someone had flipped a switch from a sleepy C-SPAN hearing to a viral moment incoming alert. In the gallery, a section of her supporters, clearly waiting for this cue, erupted in applause. Phones, previously pocketed, were suddenly out, raised, and recording. She didn't take a seat. She didn't wait to be recognized by the chair. Decorum was the first casualty. She strode to the edge of the committee table, one hand gripping the back of a chair for leverage, the other already rising to point an accusatory spear aimed directly at the senator from Louisiana. Senator Kennedy. Her voice cut through the room like a knife through butter. Sharp and serrated. Your folksy act might fool Louisiana, but we know what you really are. A racist relic protecting billionaires while people die. This was the attack, not a policy critique, but a direct, personal, and incendiary accusation. It was the nuclear bomb of modern political discourse, designed for maximum emotional impact and digital spread. The gallery exploded on cue. Tell him, AOC, someone shouted. Others took up a coordinated chant. In the press section, Twitter fingers flew across screens. Within seconds, the digital bomb had detonated. The hashtag Kennedy is racist was already beginning to trend. This was the content. This was the moment. The hearing was no longer about fiscal responsibility, it was an ambush. And the trap had been sprung. But Kennedy didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't shift in his seat or show a single flicker of anger. As the accusation of racist relic echoed in the chamber and the digital flashbulbs of his supporters' phones popped, he simply reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and began cleaning his glasses. Slowly, deliberately. It was a masterful, infuriating piece of political theater in its own right, a nonverbal declaration that her attack was nothing more than a minor smudge to be wiped away. He was not a participant in her drama, he was an audience member, patiently waiting for the performance to end. The chairman, overwhelmed by the breach of decorum, banged his gavel weakly. The congresswoman will please. But Ocasio-Cortez wasn't finished. She was just getting started. She mistook his calm for weakness, his patience for fear. This was the opening she wanted. You vote against healthcare while people die from treatable diseases, she shouted, her voice rising, feeding off the energy of her supporters. You protect oil companies while Louisiana, your state, drowns from climate change. You defend billionaires while families sleep in their cars. She was on a roll now, pacing, her voice rising in pitch as her fingers stabbed the air like a weapon. This was the performance. This was the clip. Her supporters in the gallery cheered every accusation. The reporters, once bored, were now typing furiously. Your policies are literally killing people. She landed. And you sit there with that. That patronizing smile like this is all a joke to you. Kennedy finished cleaning his glasses. He meticulously folded the handkerchief, placed it back in his jacket pocket, and slid his glasses back onto his nose. He looked at her with the patient, almost weary attention of a grandfather watching a child throw a full-blown tantrum at Thanksgiving dinner. Are you quite finished, ma'am? The simple question, and the polite, Southern, ma'am, was more devastating than any counterattack. It instantly reframed her righteous fury as a childish outburst. A breach of decorum, an interruption to the adult's work. The condescension infuriated her more than his silence. Finished? I haven't even started with you. You fossilized? Good. Kennedy interrupted. His Louisiana drawl was thick as molasses and, in this moment, twice as smooth. He had just seized control of the room. Not by raising his voice, but by lowering it. He had let her build her own pyre. And now he was striking the match. Because since we're discussing who protects billionaires and who hurts working people, perhaps we should examine your record for a moment. He reached down, not for his prepared notes, but for a plain manila folder that had been sitting unnoticed. The movement was unhurried, almost casual, but something in the room shifted. The air cooled. The reporters leaned forward. Even Ocasio-Cortez's supporters in the gallery sensed the change. The hunter was, in an instant, about to become the prey. Let's talk about September 2021. Kennedy continued, his voice maintaining its almost too calm drawl as he opened the folder. A beautiful evening in New York City. The Met Gala. He looked up, his eyes sharp behind the wire-rimmed glasses. Do you remember that night, Congresswoman? Ocasio-Cortez's eyes narrowed. The bravado faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. This was not the topic of the hearing. What does that have to do with? You wore a beautiful dress that night. Kennedy pressed on, ignoring her objection. White, had, tax the rich, written on it in big red letters. Very dramatic. Got you a lot of attention on social media. He pulled a glossy 8x10 photograph from the folder. It was the photo. AOC. Arms raised, the message blazing across her back. He held it up for the C-SPAN cameras to capture. A piece of evidence, not a political prop. That dress, Kennedy said, his voice now gentle, almost sympathetic, which made the attack all the more brutal. The one you used to lecture rich people about paying their fair share. You didn't pay for it. He let the accusation land. A stone dropped into a silent pond. Neither did you pay for the hairstyling, the makeup, the hotel room, or your boyfriend's tuxedo. Not right away, anyhow. A murmur went through the gallery. Some of Ocasio-Cortez's supporters looked genuinely confused. This was not part of the narrative they had been fed. You only paid, Kennedy continued, after the House Ethics Committee started investigating. Funny how that works, isn't it? AOC's face was reddening, the flush of righteous anger being replaced by the hot flush of exposure. That's taken completely out of context. The Ethics Committee cleared me of. The committee found you violated House rules. Ma'am, Kennedy interrupted softly, cutting her off with the facts. Not opinion. Those are their words, not mine. He pulled another document from the folder. It was the official report. Its congressional seal gleaming under the lights. Accepted, impermissible gifts, they said, failed to pay, full fair market value. Their words. He set the report down. A palpable hit, and immediately pulled out another folder. This one was visibly thicker. Heavier. She had no time to recover. No time to formulate a defense. He was pivoting, compounding the attack. But let's discuss something even more interesting, Kennedy said, his voice still infuriatingly gentle. Let's talk about what happened when you convinced Amazon not to build their headquarters in New York City. Ocasio-Cortez stood straighter, defensive, believing she was back on solid ideological ground. That was corporate welfare. We saved taxpayers billions. You cost New York tens of thousands of jobs. The number hung in the air, cold and hard. Kennedy didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Tens of thousands of families who could have had good-paying jobs. Good careers. A better life. But they don't matter much when you're busy being a social media star. Do they? He opened the new folder fully. Inside were hundreds of letters. Neatly organized. These are from some of those families. From New Yorkers who lost opportunities because of your victory. Some of them are here today. Actually. The C-SPAN camera panned, almost reluctantly, across the gallery. Tucked among the tax the rich t-shirts were several regular-looking people. Their faces etched with a pain that was not performative. One woman clutched a simple, handwritten sign. I needed that job. Kennedy looked back at Ocasio-Cortez. His voice was still gentle. But there was steel underneath it. Now, we've got about 3 more hours left in this hearing. Congresswoman, you wanted to talk about who protects billionaires and who hurts working people. He settled back into his chair. Buckle up, ma'am, because we're just getting started. Kennedy clicked a remote in his hand. The large presentation screen behind him, previously dormant, lit up. The room gasped. It was a masterstroke of political theater. A devastating visual juxtaposition that cut to the very heart of the day's conflict. On the left, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at the Met Gala, smiling, radiant, her "Tax the Rich" message a blazing piece of performance art among the world's wealthiest. On the right, a house in Puerto Rico. The roof was caved in. The walls were stained with water and mold. Buckets were scattered on the floor to catch leaks from the open sky. An elderly woman's home, destroyed and abandoned. Let's be very specific about the Met Gala, Kennedy said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Because I believe in facts. You brought up my record, let's look at yours. Not with rhetoric, but with a calendar. He clicked again. A timeline appeared on the screen. Clean, simple, and damning. September 13, 2021. You attend the Met Gala as a guest. You receive a custom designer dress, a handbag, shoes, jewelry. You also receive professional hairstyling, professional makeup, transportation, and hotel accommodations. Your boyfriend receives formal wear as well. A glamorous night, funded by impermissible gifts. Click. A series of dates scrolled by. September, October, November, December, January, February. 6 months pass. The people who provided these services, the small businesses, the stylists, the designers, they haven't been paid. Not a dime. Click. February 22, 2022. The House Ethics Committee begins its investigation into your attendance. Click. February 24, 2022. Suddenly, just 2 days later, the hairstylist gets paid. Click. March 16. The makeup artist finally receives her money. Click. May 10. 8 months after the event, the design house receives some payment for the goods. Kennedy turned to face Ocasio-Cortez, who looked like she had been slapped. Notice a pattern, Congresswoman? She stood, defensive, scrambling for the excuse that had been prepared months ago. There were administrative delays. My staff handles these. 6 months is not a delay. Ma'am, Kennedy said, his voice sharp, the folksy drawl gone, replaced by the cold precision of a prosecutor. 6 months is a choice. You and your staff made a choice. Day after day, not to pay these vendors. You were only administratively motivated when the ethics committee came knocking. That's not an oversight, Congresswoman, that's a cover-up. But let's talk about who you chose not to pay. Kennedy continued, his voice quiet again. He clicked to a new image. It was a photo of a young black woman standing proudly in front of a small, neat hair salon in Brooklyn. This is Jessica, Kennedy said quietly. Single mother of 2. Owns this salon. She was thrilled when the call came to do hair for the Met Gala. It was the biggest client she'd ever had. The biggest night of her professional career. He paused, letting the room absorb the image of the hopeful small business owner. This was the working family Ocasio-Cortez claimed to champion. Put on screen as a victim of her champion's negligence. She charged less than $500. That's it, for hours of work on the most important job she'd ever booked. Another photo appeared, a stack of invoices, stamped with dates, September, October, November. Jessica sent her invoice in September. Then she called in October. Sent a follow-up email in November. Called again in December. Sent another email in January. Called again in February. Kennedy's voice remained even, but his words landed like hammer blows. For 6 months, this single mother, who lives in the district you claim to represent, couldn't get paid for work she'd done. She told my staff she almost lost her salon. She had to take out a payday loan to make her rent. The chamber was tomb silent. The progressive activists who had come to cheer on the downfall of a relic were now watching their hero be exposed as the very thing she claimed to fight. A powerful elite stiffing the little guy. Do you know what those interest rates are, Congresswoman? 400%, sometimes more. She paid $300 in fees and interest just to borrow $2 to keep her business alive. All while waiting for a wealthy congresswoman to pay a $500 bill. He clicked to show an image of Jessica's modest storefront. She told my staff, Kennedy's voice softened, that she cried herself to sleep some nights, wondering why a congresswoman who preaches every single day about helping working people, about supporting small, minority-owned businesses, couldn't be bothered to pay her salon bill. She said the worst part wasn't even the money. It was feeling invisible, feeling like she didn't matter to the one person who was supposed to be her champion. Ocasio-Cortez tried to interrupt, her voice high and strained. My staff was responsible for. You're the boss, Kennedy said firmly, cutting her off. The buck stops with you. Isn't that what you always say about CEOs and corporations? That they are responsible for everything that happens under their watch? Or does that standard only apply to the billionaires you want to tax? And not to your own office? The gallery was quiet. Even Ocasio-Cortez's most ardent supporters seemed uncertain, their chants long forgotten. This was an argument she herself had made 100 times, now turned against her with devastating precision. Kennedy pulled out the thick, bound document again, the House Ethics Committee's official report. Would you like me to read their final findings? Because you keep saying you were cleared. He didn't wait for an answer. Quote, Representative Ocasio-Cortez violated House rules by failing to pay the full market value for her attire, accessories, and services. Not delayed payment, not administrative oversight. Violated. He looked up from the report. Even after they caught you, even after you finally started paying people like Jessica, you still didn't pay full value. The committee determined you still owed thousands more. A financial breakdown appeared on the screen, showing the retail value of the items versus the fraction she eventually paid. Your boyfriend's ticket to the gala? Kennedy added. Never paid for it all. He clicked to a new image. AOC at the gala again. Smiling, surrounded by celebrities. Now about that dress. Tax the rich. Powerful statement, Kennedy said, his voice mild again. Except here's the thing. You went there wearing a message about taxing the wealthy, while accepting thousands in free luxury goods that you didn't properly report or pay for. From vendors you stiffed for 6 months. He shook his head slowly. The folksy grandfather returning for the final judgment. Congresswoman, I'm from a small town in Louisiana. We have a saying down there, don't preach water and drink wine. He clicked to a new series of images. Which brings me to your lifestyle. Not to be intrusive, but since you've made yourself a public figure who lectures all of us about wealth and fairness. A photo of a sleek, white Tesla Model 3 appeared. 2020. You purchase a luxury electric car. These retail for well over $50. That's your choice. Photo 2. 2 modern, luxury apartment buildings. You maintain 2 residences, one in DC, one in New York. Your combined monthly rent is thousands. Again, your choice. Photo 3. Screenshots from her own Instagram. Upscale restaurants, artisanal cocktails, expensive meals. You dine at restaurants where the appetizers cost more than your constituents spend on groceries for a week. Again, Kennedy said, his hands spread wide. Your money, your choices. You earn a good salary. But it's interesting. Then he clicked the remote. The image that brought it all together. The split screen returned. On the left, the smiling congresswoman at the Met Gala. On the right, the caved-in roof of her grandmother's home in Puerto Rico. Your grandmother, Kennedy said softly. Your abuela, your own flesh and blood. The room was so quiet the hum of the air conditioning was audible. Her house was destroyed by Hurricane Maria in 2017. For years, he stressed the word. She lived like this, with that collapsed roof, those water-damaged walls, those buckets on the floor catching rainwater. For years. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on hers. You earn over $180 a year. That's more than 3 teachers make combined. Your grandmother's roof, it would have cost maybe $10 to fix. $15 at the high end. He walked over to the screen and pointed, his finger almost touching the image of the luxury car. That's less than 2 months of your combined rent. That is less than a fifth of what you paid for your Tesla. The silence in the room was profound. It was the sound of a political brand being dismantled. Bolt by bolt. The math was simple, brutal, and undeniable. But instead of helping her, Kennedy's voice hardened just slightly. You posted photos of her suffering on Twitter. You used your own grandmother's misery as a prop to attack a political opponent. He let the accusation land. So, When you storm in here and lecture me about protecting billionaires while people suffer. He said, "Forgive me, Congresswoman, if I find that a bit rich." No pun intended. Ocasio-Cortez tried to speak. But Kennedy was already moving on, pulling out another massive folder. "But you know what? Personal hypocrisy is one thing. Let's talk about something that affected tens of thousands of people. Let's discuss what happened when Amazon wanted to bring jobs to New York." He dropped the folder on the table. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud that echoed through the chamber. "These," he said, "are letters from just some of the families whose lives you destroyed with your victory." A woman stood up in the gallery. She was in her mid-40s, wearing a simple dress that had been carefully washed and ironed. She was not a protester. She was not an activist. She was the face of the working people Ocasio-Cortez claimed to champion. "My name is Maria Rodriguez," she said, her voice shaking slightly but clear. "I'm a single mother of 3. I live in the Bronx, in your district." Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. The room fell silent. Even the reporters stopped typing to listen. This was no longer a senator's attack, it was a constituent's testimony. In 2018, when Amazon announced they were building their headquarters in Queens, I applied for a job. I was working 2 jobs at the time, morning shift at Walmart, evening shift at McDonald's, trying to keep my kids fed. Maria's voice grew stronger, fueled by a long-held pain. Amazon gave me a conditional offer. A job in logistics. It would have paid over $90 a year. She let that number sink in. $90. That's more than triple what I was making. My kids could have had their own rooms. I could have afforded an apartment without roaches. My oldest could have thought about college. Maria looked directly at Ocasio-Cortez. Her eyes filled with a grief that was deeper than anger. "Then you decided Amazon was corporate welfare. You celebrated when they left. You called it a victory." Her voice cracked. "Where's my victory, Congresswoman?" She sat down. The silence that followed was deafening. Kennedy stood slowly. He walked to a simple whiteboard and picked up a marker. "Now, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez said New York was giving away billions to Amazon. Ma'am, let me explain why that's not how it works." He drew a simple diagram. "Imagine you're offered a job. It pays $150 a year. Your taxes on that would be about $30. You'd keep $120. He looked at her. "Would you turn down that job because you don't want your boss to keep $30 of your labor? Would you say, 'No thanks, I'd rather have $0. So my boss doesn't get anything either'?" A few people in the gallery actually laughed. Not at Kennedy's joke, but at the absurdity of the logic. "That's what you did to New York," he said. "That's what you did to Maria Rodriguez." "That's not." AOC stood up. "Those incentives could have been used to invest in our communities directly. We could have used that money for—" "What money?" Kennedy interrupted gently. "The money doesn't exist without the jobs. It's like saying, I declined that $150 job. So now I have $150 to spend. No, ma'am, you have nothing." As if cued by Maria's testimony. Another person stood in the gallery. A man in his 50s. Wearing a construction worker's vest. Carlos Martinez. He said simply, "I'm Maria's brother-in-law. I was supposed to help build that headquarters. 2 years of steady work. Good money. Now I drive for Uber. Competing with 1,000 other guys for scraps." A young woman stood next. Jasmine Chen. "I moved here from California for the Amazon job. Sold my car to pay for the move. Put down a deposit on an apartment. Then you killed the deal. I'm still paying off the debt from that move." An older man, gray-haired and wearing a faded union jacket, rose slowly. "Thomas Brennan, electrician, 30 years in the trade. I bid on contracts for the Amazon building. Won some of them. Hired 6 new guys. Had to let them all go. Had to sell the equipment at a loss. Some of those young electricians left the trade entirely. Good kids who just needed a chance." A woman in her 30s stood near the back. Patricia Johnson. "I ran a small catering company. We specialized in corporate events. I took out a business loan to expand. Bought a bigger kitchen. When the deal died, I was overextended. I lost everything I'd built. I'm a waitress now." A young man, no more than 25, stood with his mother. Derek Williams. "I was finishing my degree in computer science at CUNY. Had an internship lined up that would have turned into a full-time job. Now I'm leaving New York. There's just nothing here for us anymore." One by one, they stood, a chorus of the forgotten. The restaurant owner, the daycare center operator, the dry cleaner. All of them had believed in the promise. All of them had invested. All of them had been betrayed by a politician who wanted a Twitter victory more than she wanted their prosperity. Kennedy let their voices fill the chamber. When they finished, he clicked to a new slide. According to researchers at NYU, he said, Amazon's headquarters would have created at least 15,000 additional indirect jobs. Tens of thousands of direct jobs. 15,000 indirect. That's 40,000 families total. 40,000 households. 40,000 dreams you crushed. Congresswoman, for a tweet. Kennedy closed the Amazon folder and picked up another one, even thicker, but at least the Amazon decision only killed jobs that hadn't been created yet. Your next proposal would destroy millions of jobs that already exist. Let's talk about your Green New Deal. Kennedy's voice dropped, becoming more serious. Your signature proposal. The plan you say will save America. He clicked his remote, and the screen filled with text from the resolution. Net zero emissions by 2050. 100% renewable energy by 2030. Eliminate all fossil fuels. Retrofit every building in America. He looked up. That's ambitious. I'll give you that. He pulled out a thick stack of economic studies. Multiple independent analyses have tried to calculate what your plan would cost. The range is somewhere between $50 and $90 trillion over 10 years. He let that number sit for a moment. Ma'am, our entire federal budget, for everything, is about $5 trillion a year. Your plan would cost 10 times that. Every year. For a decade. It's not ambitious. It's impossible. But let's say we tried. He continued, clicking through slides. The Heritage Foundation ran the models. By 2040, over 1 million jobs would be lost. Lost, not created. Every family in America would lose. On average, what they earn in almost a year. Vanished. He clicked to an image of an oil rig operator. Louisiana alone has hundreds of thousands of people working in oil and gas. Your plan eliminates those jobs. All of them. Let me tell you about one. Jake Thibodeau. Lives in Homa. 34 years old. Works offshore. Makes $82 a year. 3 kids. Just bought their first house. Your Green New Deal eliminates his job overnight. They lose the house. The family breaks. And for what? He clicked to a final slide. A single number. 0.1 degrees Celsius. Even if we did it, Kennedy said, his voice soft but cutting. Even if we spent $90 trillion and destroyed millions of jobs, global temperatures would decrease by 1/10 of 1 degree. By the year 2100, it's like burning down your house to kill a single mosquito. And the real kicker? He added, 80% of solar panels and 70% of lithium batteries are made in China. You're not saving the planet. You're outsourcing our economy to our biggest rival while they build a new coal plant every week. He pointed to the real-world results of similar plans in Germany, reverting to coal. California, rolling blackouts. And Texas, frozen wind turbines. Kennedy closed the Green New Deal folder. But you know what? He said. At least that's just a proposal. It hasn't destroyed anything yet. Except your credibility with economists. But there's one person whose suffering wasn't theoretical. One person who needed help right now. He opened the final folder and pulled out a printed tweet. The screen filled with the image of AOC's own post, the collapsed roof. The water-damaged walls. Let's go back to your grandmother. Kennedy read the tweet aloud. Hurricane Maria relief hasn't arrived. Trump blocked relief money. You posted this in June 2021. The hurricane hit in September 2017. That's almost 4 years. Ma'am, 4 years while you were earning $174 a year. Buying a Tesla. And attending the Met Gala. Your grandmother lived like this. Within hours of your tweet, Kennedy continued, something interesting happened. Regular Americans, many of whom disagree with your politics, started a GoFundMe. Plumbers, nurses, teachers. In 2 days, they raised over $100. He clicked to show screenshots of the fundraiser. $50 from Sarah Martinez. My grocery money, but nobody's grandmother should live like this. $100 from James Chen. My own grandmother died after Katrina, $25 from Patricia O'Brien. I'm on disability. This is all I can give. You know what you did, Congresswoman? Kennedy asked quietly. You rejected the money. Confusion rippled through the gallery. Your spokesperson said, and I'm quoting, "We will not be accepting money from right-wing activists." Right-wing activists? Kennedy's voice hardened. That's what you called these working people. These single moms and people on disability. Who just wanted to help an elderly woman. Because they didn't vote the way you wanted. Their compassion was insulting to you. He shook his head. You didn't accept their money because it would destroy your narrative. You needed her to keep suffering so you could keep blaming him. You preferred to let your grandmother suffer than to accept help from people who disagree with you. He clicked his remote one final time. A large chart filled the screen, divided into two columns. What AOC says, and what AOC does. Says, tax the rich. Does, accepts thousands in luxury gifts. Fails to pay small business vendors. Says, fight corruption. Does, violates House ethics rules. Pays bills only when caught. Says, economic justice. Does, destroys 40,000 working-class job opportunities for a tweet. Says, care for the vulnerable. Does, lets own grandmother live in ruins for years. Then rejects $100,000 in help for her. Kennedy let the chart speak for itself. You talk about helping others. But you help yourself. You preach sacrifice. But you live in luxury. You claim to fight the elite, but Congresswoman. He paused. You are the elite. Ocasio-Cortez stood, her voice shaking with emotion. This is a coordinated attack. This is the patriarchy, the system, trying to silence a strong woman of color who dares to. Ma'am, Kennedy's voice cut through her defense like a knife. I'm reading from your tweets. From official House ethics reports. From your constituents. He pointed to the gallery. Jessica, the hairstylist you didn't pay? She's a woman of color. Maria Rodriguez, who lost the Amazon job. She's Latina. This isn't about race or gender. It's about whether you tell the truth. And the evidence shows you don't.